right, well, thank you everyone for attending today's workshop. So you want to join a nonprofit board. My name is Jordan Neal, and I am the Adult Services Manager here at the library. I just wanted to briefly share that if you're interested in starting or growing your business or nonprofit, the library has a variety of resources to help you. From market research to tax basics, we're just happy to help you here. So we have our information on the back table as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our moderator this evening, Genevieve Kirk. She is the director of the Center for Nonprofit Excellence at the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois. So please join me in welcoming Genevieve Kirk.
Thank you, Jordan, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate you spending your evening with us tonight. Again, my name is Genevieve Kirk. I'm the Center for Nonprofit Excellence Director at the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois. If you're not familiar with the Community Foundation, we are a nonprofit philanthropic organization organized for the long-term benefit of East Central Illinois. And our Center for Nonprofit Excellence helps local nonprofit organizations and their boards to be as effective as possible. One of the ways that we're doing this is through our Board Bootcamp series. Tonight's session is called So You Want to Join a Nonprofit Board, and before I introduce you to our panelists, I wanted to just invite a show of hands so that we better understand who is here today in the audience. If you are currently serving on a nonprofit board of directors, could you raise your hand? Okay, many board members here tonight, great. If you are a nonprofit staff member or executive director, could you raise your hand? Okay, I see a little overlap there. And finally, if you're a community member potentially interested in serving on a nonprofit board of directors, would you mind raising your hand now? Okay, great. Well, we welcome you from all these different points of view. Thank you for being here tonight. So in the spirit of getting to know each other just a little bit, I would like to invite you to share with someone nearby, hopefully someone you didn't arrive with, what brings you here this evening? What are you hoping to get out of this event? Just 30 seconds. Go ahead and chat.
Genevieve brought me here. I'm on the board.
Are you?
Yes.
I didn't know that. I wasn't making that connection.
I kind of want to sing into this microphone. I kind of want to sing into this microphone. I sang karaoke a week ago. Now,
What's your go-to song?
now, Dixie Chicks.
Which
Well,
one?
the
Cowboy
Chicks.
Take Me Away.
No,
Goodbye, Earl.
That's what I would sing. If I was by myself, I'd sing Cowboy Take Me Away. But I was with my friend, and she wanted to sing Not Ready to Make Nice, so I sang that.
You wanted to listen to the song
So badly. I'm not ready.
I will be stepping off stage when that
I was in
happens.
It'll Do in Muhammad, which I had never been to. It'll Do. It's this dive bar in Muhammad.
I love diverse.
It was shockingly diverse. Like, to the point
Okay,
that
ding,
Joe
ding,
had
ding.
followed me
30
back, and
seconds
he's like,
are up.
I observed some things.
I love to hear the sharing, though. Didn't you miss that when we weren't doing in-person meetings? So hopefully you made a good connection here tonight. Our goal this evening is to have our experts, who are all serving on different boards of directors, to tell you about the benefits of board service, what to expect when joining a nonprofit board of directors. We'll go over basic board roles and responsibilities and things to consider before you take that jump and join a nonprofit board. I'll be asking our panelists here some questions to begin, and later in our program we'll have a few minutes for questions and answers. So if you have a question that comes to mind during our time tonight, file it away and there'll be a chance for you to ask that towards the end. And don't worry, I will wrap us up at least by 6:30 since it's a very nice evening out tonight. So with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists here this evening. Tonight, we're very pleased to welcome Rebecca Goyette, who is the Chief Development Officer at the United Way of Champaign County. Rebecca also is on the board of Clark Lindsay and the Executive Club of Champaign County. Let's welcome Rebecca. Next, we have Chris Randalls. He is the Vice President of Administration and CFO at Parkland College. He is on the board of the University of Illinois Community Credit Union in the role of treasurer, the Champaign Rotary Club, Champaign County Crime Stoppers, and the Illini Rebounders Club. That's a lot of boards, Chris. Welcome, Chris. And finally, we have Michelle Gonzalez, who is Special Assistant in Public Engagement at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Michelle is on our board at the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois, as well as the Champaign-Urbana Schools Foundation and the Advancement Council for the Krannert Center for the Performing Arts. Would you join me in welcoming all of our panelists this evening? Okay, let's get into the questions. To start, my first question is for all of you, and if you could just introduce yourself to us, tell us how and why you got started in board service. I'd like to begin with Michelle, and then we'll work our way down the table.
First, I'd like to say thank you to the Community Foundation for setting this up and for inviting me to be here. So I'm very honored to be asked. So I was a third grade teacher for 12 years in Unit 4. And in 2014, I decided to step away from the classroom. And when I did that, I found all this extra time in my life. And I found volunteerism. And I started to volunteer for different events. And just showed up to everything. And after that, I worked for State Senator Scott Bennett, the late State Senator Scott Bennett. And in that work, I was able to learn about all the different organizations in the community, and I met dozens of community leaders that have such a passion for Champaign-Urbana. And through that work, people saw my passion for the community, and I was invited to have coffee with various people to talk about, ways that I can serve. And so I was invited to be on a couple boards and at the Advancement Council, and I had a hard time saying no then, but I've learned to say no now. But it's been a real gift to be able to serve. So.
I also want to thank the Community Foundation for having me, Angie in particular. I started getting involved in boards probably 15, 16 years ago, and it was actually a colleague of mine. We were in Rotary together. She was on the board of Family Service. I knew nothing about board service, and I could not say no. I still have trouble saying no. Maybe I'll learn something here. So that was the first board I got involved with, and I think we'll talk about it in this discussion tonight, but it sort of snowballs as you get on a board and get more involved, you meet more people, there's more opportunities to do more boards and things outside of board activities that are wonderful. And yeah, I do think saying no and picking the right one to be involved with becomes a very important decision too.
Well, I want to not only thank the Community Foundation, but just remind everyone how fortunate we are to have such an awesome community foundation in our community here. The services it provides, the grant funding it provides, we're very fortunate. So thank you to both of you, and thanks to all of you for coming. So service has always just been a really important part of my life. I was raised in a household where that was a high priority. My parents always served our community, and so that was just part of my upbringing. I've spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector, so I've always reported to a board, which, for better or worse, reminded me the importance of having good board members. So I've been really intentional in my board development over the years personally, and I've always chosen organizations that kind of resonated with me personally, whose mission I felt I wanted to advance. That's a really important part of board work, is making sure that you're aligned with the organization and that you can be the best ambassador possible. So for me, that's, but it's looked differently at different stages of my life, depending on what my own priorities were and the time I had, and kind of the skill set that I felt I could offer different organizations.
Great. Well, what a super group of servant leaders right here as our panelists. We appreciate your time tonight and sharing with us. For my next question, just wanted to talk about the basics. What's the purpose of a board of directors? What function is a board supposed to play for a nonprofit organization? This is for any of you. Feel free to jump in.
I think one important distinction to realize is that you're not really there to do the day-to-day operations of things. I don't think the executive directors want you to do that. And nor do you really. I mean, that would be too big of a burden. You all also have jobs, families, lives. This is a volunteer service thing that you would be doing. So that's one important thing to know. It's really to help set the vision of the not-for-profit, the strategic plan, and then sort of at the highest level make sure that the organization's equipped to meet that vision and strategic plan. Finances are a big part of that. I know that can be sort of off-putting to people. It's either not fun or it's scary, but certainly your fiduciary responsibility would be one of the primary ones, is to make sure that funding is there for the initiatives and support them any way that you can in those efforts.
I guess I'll speak as a staff member of a nonprofit. I think a big important part, or a big part of being a board member, is serving as an ambassador for the organization and being supportive of the staff. And so, while absolutely board members do not need to be kind of what I say in the weeds of an organization, I do think it's important that they have a strong connection to the staff of the organization and are thoughtful about how they want to help advance. So, for example, at various points at different boards I've been on, specifically for organizations who have had staff members, because I've also served on boards that were volunteer-run organizations. I've asked intentionally, is there a staff member that you think my skill set would be best aligned with, that I could serve better than just, in addition to the capacity of serving the entire board? And so I know for me, I have certain board members that help kind of advance my fundraising work, and that's their skill set. That's what they enjoy doing. There are only a few of them that enjoy doing that, but I think just thinking about how you can be an ambassador, how you can use your skill set, and how you can, again, just advance the mission of that organization in a really intentional way. And I think the more you can invest, the better the organization is served by you.
Along the lines of being an ambassador for the organization, I think each time you go to a meeting, you learn more and more about the organization, because we're ever evolving, right? So every time you go, you learn something new. And as an ambassador for the organization, it's important that you represent that organization in the community and promote it and talk about the things that they do and the resources that they provide, because we're very fortunate to live in such a resource-rich community. There's always opportunities to volunteer for the organization, so there'll be events where they might need somebody to help check in or just provide some sort of service so that you can be the face of that nonprofit.
Thanks. Good point, Michelle. I'd also add that's a great entry point as well if you're shopping around at different nonprofits that are looking for board members. Starting as a volunteer is a good way to kind of get initial exposure before making a commitment to maybe a committee or the full board of directors. Next question's for Becca. Can you tell us what skills and expertise do you feel are most needed on nonprofit boards?
All. Really, I think that ability to listen, to synthesize what you're hearing, and to contribute back. Nobody wants what I call kind of the rubber stamp board members that just show up, say yes to everything, or those that kind of fly in, the pigeon board members that fly in, kind of make a mess and then take off and aren't there to help kind of solve the problems that the organization has. But everyone in this room has a specific skill set, even if you don't realize what it is. And there are different board assessments you can do to kind of determine what skill set you have that you might be able to lend. But I would say, I think one of the things that you need to think about is just sort of how what you want to get out of the experience, and then talking to different organizations that you're interested in. And that's the other part of it too. I know a lot of people who just say yes because they're asked, but does the organization's mission resonate with you or not? And I've been asked to serve on boards for organizations that are great organizations. Their just mission didn't resonate with me, and I didn't feel like I could be a genuine ambassador for them. And so, every board needs a broad range of skill sets. I think, for an organization like ours, because of the breadth of the kind of work we're doing in the community, we need educators, we need individuals that are willing, CPAs are helpful because they help us on our finance committee. Everybody needs attorneys, and we also need, we need, really the entire breadth. I also think it's very valuable for boards to have, nonprofit employees. I think it's also valuable for boards to have individuals that work in service industries in their community, if that's available for individual schedules. And so, the main skill set, I think, is being active, being available, being present. We don't expect perfect attendance, but I think if you can't make it, following up, asking questions, and making sure that you know what's going on with the organization. And, for me, I think one of the things that I love hearing in the community is someone saying, oh, I met your board member and they were sharing XYZ that you're doing. And that's always so rewarding to feel like our board knows what's happening and is excited about it and wants to share that out in the community. But it doesn't have to be as kind of scary or as demanding. I remember when I was talking to somebody once about United Way's board, and they said, oh, I would hope to be able to be on that board someday. And I said, well, if you really genuinely have an interest, I'd be happy to facilitate a meeting someone on our board who makes those decisions. And they said, oh, I don't think I'm qualified to be on your board. And I said, I think you very much are qualified to be on our board if you're interested. So, I think sometimes people think in their head it's a much bigger thing than it really has to be.
Thanks, Becca. Yes, we work with a lot of executive directors through our Executive Director Leadership Network, and one thing we hear over and over is engagement. How do we get our board more engaged? So if you're coming with those fresh eyes and a spirit of really wanting to dig in, be a support, ask the right questions, that's, I think, every executive director's dream for a board member. My next question is for Michelle. Can you tell us what are good questions we should be asking or considering before committing to serve on a nonprofit board?
Sure. So before I answer this question, I want to point out that you have a handout that answers that. It has a bunch of questions that you can think about. But one thing that I always question is, what's the time commitment? Different boards require different amounts of time commitment, and sometimes it's very minimal, which, with our busy lives, it's pretty doable. So I've appreciated the fact that there's been a variety of time commitments for the boards that I serve on. The time commitments can be the meetings themselves, committees that you serve on, any opportunities for leadership to step up and do more work for the board. So it just depends on what you're willing to put into it. And also, how long is the length of your term? I just found out that Chris served on a board for 2 to 6-year terms. I have not done that yet. So that's quite an accomplishment, but different boards have different lengths of terms. And how many people are on the board? Perhaps you want to serve on a smaller board or a bigger board. It doesn't matter, but it's up to you and who those other people might be. You might want to know who else serves on the board.
Good thoughts. Thank you, Michelle. Now to Chris, if you can just tell us a bit more, most important roles and responsibilities of nonprofit board members.
Yeah, again, here's another handout. Michelle led the way.
Well, look at that.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah, this is very on target, as you would expect. But again, my perception is that it's the higher level stuff. I certainly agree with what both Becca and Michelle said in terms of being engaged, with the organization. One thing I've most enjoyed really is knowing some of the employees and the activities of the organizations I'm involved in. So having said that, I think that's important. That's part of being an ambassador. You know what they do, you know how the place works, whatever that place is. And occasionally I will shoot a director a message about something that I've seen out in public that might not be, quite right. But it's usually just that, hey, I'm almost like a secret shopper. You're out there too in the community. You are a user. You are a member or a client or a customer of that organization yourself. So, if you're experiencing something good or bad, others probably are as well. And I think the leadership likes to hear about that. Again, the fiscal thing is big. I am a CPA, and that's my daytime job, as being an accountant. So that brings a certain skill set that I think all organizations need, one that many people might not enjoy. So, you're able to bring that element, or I'm able to bring that. Just as Becca said, you all have your skill sets that you could bring. So determining what that might be that you bring to an organization. And to tack on a little bit to something that Michelle said, sort of one caveat, I was involved with an organization that I very much believed in their mission, but the role of the board member was very much to be a fundraiser. So donations were expected, which they make that known up front, and many are that way, and that's something you should be aware of, whether you can afford that or want to do that. But this role as a board member was also to actively fundraise, to come up with creative ideas, and creative beyond holding a golf tournament, which is something most do and most of us are familiar with. That's not my skill set. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not creative. I'm not really comfortable asking people for money. So that wasn't a fit for me, despite how awesome the organization was. I didn't think I was bringing the skill set they needed, frankly. So I think knowing, if you're going to be a good fit and if you can be a plus to the organization is a big part of it too. But again, high level vision, strategic mission, that sort of thing, helping set policies and procedures that achieve that mission, and then giving them the tools, the funding, the ideas to carry out the mission, I think is the high level role of a board member.
Super. Thank you, Chris. Next question's for any of you to respond to. It's kind of a personal anecdote. If you can just tell us, what are the biggest benefits of board service to you personally? What makes your service worth it?
I think just seeing through helping organizations see through their mission. One of the most fulfilling board experiences I've had, I served on the advisory board as a local organization was starting Girls on the Run of Champaign County. And I just really believed in the organization's mission. It wasn't just about getting girls active, but it was about connecting them to each other and building up their self-esteem through physical movement and engagement with one another. And so we were it was a national organization, and we were bringing it here locally. And it was just wonderful to see that from the ground up and go to all the sites and talk to the educators and talk to the individuals at the various sites that were going to host teams, and to help recruit coaches for the girls, and then of course to watch the girls and see the program through. Right now I'm serving on a board that functions at a really high level. I'm on the board for Lindsay Communities, of which Clark Lindsay is a part, and it's a high functioning board, again at that very high level, overseeing large projects. My skill set, I'm upskilling big time. It's definitely the most kind of sophisticated board I've been on, and so I spent my first year really learning and observing and contributing in ways that I could, but now I'm starting to kind of dig in and be able to get more involved in the decision making and so forth. But I think just making sure that, the most valuable part is seeing the organization's mission through, but then also the personal development that you experience as a board member is wonderful.
I'm a people person, and I really enjoy learning about other people and the work that they do and their roles in the community. And through my board volunteerism, I've really built this network of people that I think are incredible. And so to me, the biggest benefit has been the people that I've met through my service.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing for me as well. I've worked at the same employer, Parkland, for 29 years now. It's a wonderful place to work, a lot of great people, but you find yourself sort of in a bubble with who you interact with, the types of things you talk about, what business means, and that sort of thing, good, bad, and otherwise. So you really do meet a ton of people that you otherwise probably would not meet, both on the board, the staffs of the organization, and whoever you're serving, whatever the client base may be. For a specific example of something that was very rewarding was the board I was on was Family Service, which Meals on Wheels is maybe the sort of name brand thing that you guys might be familiar with that they do amongst many, many other things. But they had an individual who was their executive director for, I think, 30 years or close to it. So obviously there was great stability there. She was a wonderful person. It wasn't only her career, it was her life. And she had to step down while I was president of the board. So replacing the executive director is probably one of the largest challenges you could face, particularly someone that's been there for 30 years. And to be frank, not necessarily an organization that has sort of a lot of cachet or name brand in terms of finding a replacement. We were fortunate enough to find a temporary replacement, Joan Dixon, who is in the room, and temporary is getting longer and longer, I think. But that was very rewarding to be able to participate in that, lead a board through something that was frankly more difficult than your average, monthly meeting that you become accustomed to. And connections that I had through other organizations, Rotary, I think, being the example in this case, is how I knew Joan, and she was actually at the Community Foundation prior to Angie. But so I was aware of her situation and expertise, and had a connection that I could reach out to her and see if she could help us bridge the gap while we tried to position the agency better to find a permanent replacement. So that was very rewarding in a specific way that was both a challenge, somewhat time consuming, but well worth it in the end.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to just swing back through with one more question to each of our panelists. I'm sure you all have questions too. We will get to them here just in a moment. Let me go to Becca now. There's this thing that you may have heard called a give or get. Tell us about that. What is generally expected of board members in terms of time and financial commitment based on the places you've served as a board member?
Sure, it's very different for every organization. So for those of you who aren't familiar, give or get is the kind of the notion that you either raise a certain amount of money for the organization or you personally give that amount of money to that organization. That's typically a larger organization policy. And in my experience, it tends to be organizations that are a little bit bigger. I will say this. It is really important to be financially invested in the organization that you're serving if it's a nonprofit. And that doesn't always mean a significant gift in terms of a dollar amount. I, for 10 years, worked for the University of Illinois YMCA. A third of our board members were U of I students. That's built into the policy of the board makeup. We just asked the students to give $5 a year. But we needed to be able to say every board member is invested in our work and contributes back. So if you have no intention of financially contributing to a board and you say, well, they get my time and that's enough, it's not enough. You really should be financially contributing back if that's an expectation and hope of the organization, which if it's a nonprofit, it probably is a hope and an expectation. If you're asked to join a board and that's not broached in the first meeting, I would bring it up yourself. I think that's really important. That was an area that was kind of gray and fuzzy before I joined my organization, as large as it is. It just wasn't so. I asked that in my interview. And I said, what is our board policy on giving and how much leeway do I have to talk to board members about giving? And everybody was like, oh my gosh, she just went there. And I said, that's really important for me to be out. If I'm going to be out in the community asking for support, I need to be able to say that 100% of our board is contributing to the organization. So do I have any authority over that in terms of making that happen? And so our policy changed a little bit, just that there is a minimum giving requirement. It's, again, a low threshold. It's not a set amount. And so, but I think that if you don't feel passionately enough about an organization to contribute something, then it's probably not a good space for you to be in and a good investment of your time. And if that's something they need, is financial contributions. So as far as time, of course it varies. Every organization has a different expectation of what you're to give. Again, that was something that I think we lowballed when we were talking to individuals before I became a part of the organization. There was lots of, it's a really easy board to join. And I'm fortunate that we're not a fractured organization. So no, there wasn't any major challenges, but we need to thrive, and that requires an investment of time to go from here to here. And so how does that look for individuals, and what can they contribute, and where do you need them? So again, I think those are things that even once you're on a board, if you ever have the ability to then bring new individuals on, influencing those conversations and being able to be a part of that would really serve your organization if you understood how, how transparency and what the organization's needs are is valuable to those early conversations with potential board members.
Yes, absolutely agree with everything you just said. Thank you, Becca. Back to Chris. Can you tell us what are some resources you found to be a good, engaged board member or officer?
Sure. Well, one, you're all here. I think this is a great start in continuing the series. At the time, I was on the board of Family Service. We did a thing through the Community Foundation called Building Better Boards, which I guess is Board Boot Camp now. Thank you. I said I wouldn't remember that change. So doing things like that are available in the community, I think, are important. Depending on what boards you're on, they may offer to send you to training, or may have training that you can do via Zoom or webinars. It just varies greatly depending on sort of the financial situation and the size of the organization you're involved with. But I would encourage you to seek those out. I think that goes hand in hand with learning about the organization, being able to be a better ambassador for it. And while not getting in the weeds with the director and staff, I do think the director and staff appreciate board members that do understand the mission, understand what they're doing, and can be supportive in that role. Again, I'm on the board of the University of Illinois Community Credit Union, which is sort of a shift from most of the nonprofits we're talking about. So they are a nonprofit, not necessarily in a service way that pretty much everything else we've spoken about is. But credit unions in general are sort of a movement, if you will. I knew very little about them myself until I got involved with the board, other than all my car loans had come from them. I knew they had the best rates, and that's where I went. And now that I'm on the board, I understand why and how they have the best rates. But that's a financial institution, so while it's a not-for-profit, they certainly have more money than some of the service organizations. So I've been fortunate enough to even go to conferences that are specifically for board members of credit unions, and meet other board members, meet other directors of credit unions from across the nation. So that's a very engaging way to be more involved as well. Now, certainly not every organization you get involved with has that ability financially or otherwise, but there's all different levels that would be open to you to do those things. Many of them happen to sync with my job as well, which is nice. Parkland is very supportive of its administrators being involved on boards and with service organizations in the community. So some reasonable amount of time during your workday that might be devoted to learning about that thing is certainly acceptable. Parkland is also a not-for-profit and wants to be part of the community. So there is a lot of, hate to use the word synergy from the 80s, but a lot of us are interconnected in many ways. Obviously United Way has a program for employers to give. We work with the University of Illinois on many things. So many of us in this community are in it for the greater good. And I think everyone would be encouraging of you learning more about the organization that you're trying to serve.
And now to Michelle. So for those here who identified as community members who want to join a nonprofit board, can you tell us how can they connect with nonprofits that are looking for board members?
Well, again, you have a handout. That is a really good start. And I already mentioned that a good way to learn about the different organizations is to volunteer. I think that that's an important first step before you decide this is the organization I want to try to be on the board with. But I think if you understand your why and figure out what it is that you can bring to an organization, that is the first step that you need to take. So when I stepped away from the classroom and I was approached about joining the board for the CU Schools Foundation, it made a lot of sense because I know that education is something that I'm very passionate about. So that made a lot of sense. But as I continued on my journey and realized things like how much I appreciated the arts, it made a lot of sense too that I would be on the Advancement Council for Cranard. So I think that if you have some sort of passion or inkling to serve in any way through volunteerism or just learning about what kinds of resources we have, you can find a cause that resonates with you.
Super. And addressing those handouts, which by the way, if you registered for this event, you'll receive an email from me where I'll share these with you electronically. The board match form for community members, if you want to fill that out, it's a PDF that you can send back to us and we'll shop it around with different nonprofits that have openings so that they can follow up if they're interested with you. Alternatively, we have a listing of open board positions in East Central Illinois that we've buddied up with the United Way of Champaign County to provide to you. There's a ton of different service areas listed there if you're interested in working with individuals who are experiencing homelessness, older adults, recovery services, mental health issues. There are tons of nonprofits on that list, and I'm sure that's only a very small fraction of the actual amount of nonprofit openings right now in our community. So again, if you know of a nonprofit that's looking for board members, send them to us, and we'd be happy to facilitate some connections. And my last question, again, for any of you, if you can just share most important piece of advice you'd give to people considering board service, if we haven't already touched on it.
This is a little harsh, but I'll just say it. Just remember that your board service is not about you, it's about your organization. Some people forget that and they get really, they dig into their own priorities and their own focus, and they forget that it's about the mission of the organization. And, I always remind people, both on our board, on our staff, and our supporters, that the organization is bigger than all of us. And it's been here before us, it'll be here after us. And so it's just really important that we're serving the organization, and that the organization's not serving us. So I just, remembering that to me is a top priority.
I'd like to do a plug for our board boot camp that we are part of right now, but I'd also like to promote a program through the United Way called the Emerging Community Leaders Program. It's excellent. It's a really great way to learn more about not just nonprofits and being on a board, but how to fundraise and being philanthropic and all these different opportunities to network, and you do a small group project where you serve the community in some way. It's an excellent program if you want to learn more. And another point that I wanted to point out was that a lot of our boards have people that have been on there for a long time. So I would encourage you to encourage people that might not be serving on a board, that might want to do something for the community, to think about it and to perhaps learn from you. So be an example for the people that you know.
And I think just, once you get involved with the board, to sort of really get involved and, ask questions, don't become overwhelmed right away. It's easy to, I've started on many boards where on day one, first meeting, you feel like you know nothing. You thought you knew something about the organization. I mean, they're obviously talking about business, things that have been going on, very specific things that you wouldn't know prior to that. And it would be very easy to feel like you're in over your head, and that's probably not the case. You just need to get up to speed. And I think, finding another board member that maybe, suits your style, doesn't have to be a formal mentor-mentee relationship, but just someone that you can rely on, have their email, maybe have coffee with, maybe get up to speed with them on where the board's at, what initiatives are going on. And I think it can be very rewarding. Like Becca said, it's not about you or us, the individual, but often it's fortunate that it is sort of a two-way street, that if you do your role well, you get a lot out of it. And again, for me, it's really been meeting people and making friends I otherwise wouldn't have had I not been involved.
I'd say just one more thing is be open to how you might develop and grow. So I've had board members that started and said, I do not fundraise. I will never fundraise. Don't ask me to fundraise. Did I mention I don't fundraise? And who I've turned into magnificent ambassadors to join me on visits and out in the community, because they open themselves up to learning that I'm not asking you to ask people for money. I'm asking you to ask people to join you in supporting our community. And it's just a different narrative. And I think likewise, I've had people who have said, I can't take a leadership position on the board. I'm not comfortable talking in front of others. That happened with someone recently, and I watched her stand up at our annual meeting and speak in front of 400 people a month ago. And I was just smiling at, her growth and the fact that she was open to that and being willing to do that for us. So just keeping an open mind.
Love that. You have all been such a very attentive audience. We really appreciate that. Now it's your turn to ask questions, anything that we didn't touch on, or maybe something you referenced when you were sharing with your partner earlier tonight. If anyone has a question, feel free to raise your hand.
Yes.
Rob Tobias. And I'm going, if you say your question, I will then repeat it into this mic so it's recorded.
Okay. So I have served on a couple boards, and I find myself, Becca mentioned about the rubber stamp board member. I'm like the guy that questions everything. So how can you find a happy medium as a board member to not be, you don't want to be a rubber stamper, but someone like me who just like questions everything, and then the board meeting goes long and I'm the bad guy, or somebody comes up to you after the board meeting and says, thank you for saying that because I wanted to.
This is a great question. So it's what is the balance between rubber stamping as a board member and asking a ton of questions where the board meeting goes on forever? Where's the balance there? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Go ahead.
That's a great question, Rob. I don't know. Some of it's going to come with experience, really, of, just like any other job, you're going to get better at it over time. You're not going to be perfect day one. I think when I started board activity, I probably leaned toward the rubber stamp side of just get along, and if this place is running okay, yes, vote yes on everything. I've probably had my moments where I've also went the other direction. And we're all human, right? It can even be the mood you're in. I mean, if you're just honest with yourself, you can have a day where, I'm going to question things more. And we're all people here. We all have our jobs. So while that might not be ideal for the director or the staff that day, things are going to happen. But I think you end up finding your happy medium, particularly if the organization is ran well. You gain some confidence that things are going well, at least at that level that, I think you should be concerned with. And if it's not, maybe asking more questions is the right thing. Maybe being that person is what's needed, and somebody needs to do it. But I think often you will eventually get sort of the sweet spot of knowing that things are running well, you're doing your job, you ask some key questions, you feel confident with the answers to those questions, and then know not to dig any deeper.
I've been relieved as a staff member on occasion when board members have asked more questions about things that I thought were moving a little bit too rapidly and maybe we needed to slow down on. But we had a board member, he actually just went off our board. He was a phenomenal board member, and he did something and really encouraged us as an organization to kind of change the way we do things, where he said, I'm not getting enough information pre-board meeting, so could I have XYZ information? So we started adding study sessions for larger issues prior to the board meeting that board members could attend, that kind of dug in a little bit deeper for those that maybe weren't as familiar with specific issues, especially for larger things. When we were getting ready to do large funding decisions, when we were getting ready to make kind of big strategy decisions for the organization, we enacted a consent agenda. And so then we really started pushing the notion of read this information before and ask your questions prior if you can. Not that nothing will be covered in the board meeting, but it just cut down on a lot of that. But he encouraged that change for us, and we were responsive to it. And, you know, I think it overall has really increased kind of education and awareness around various issues for our board.
Yes, here in the front.
I had a question regarding, and it may be that it pertains to each individual organization, but is there guidelines to the ethics of fundraising or the stuff that you're involved in a nonprofit? You know, things like that could possibly cross over that you know, a friend benefited because you held some fundraiser at their place, or along those lines, or you know, you did a golf thing because you wanted to golf, not because you wanted to raise money and stuff like that. I don't know where the lines are there.
So the question is regarding ethics of fundraising. I think we're touching on conflict of interest policy as well. Can any of you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, so every organization does have a conflict of interest policy, which is, you know, pretty straightforward, but at least it's bringing that to the forefront, that they're aware of it. I've been fortunate that I haven't really, and I've probably been on 10 different boards of a variety of sizes and types of organizations, that hasn't come into play. Probably, the closest I came to that, and it's not quite what you're getting at, I don't think, but I was involved in an organization that had a service mission, and it seemed as though every event that we did was not just included alcohol, but that was a forefront thing, was the drinking aspect of it, or the prizes were bottles of whiskey or whatever. I just didn't think that felt good. And that's not really the same thing, but there's some moral barometer there of is this right? And so we addressed that. I mean, that was something I brought up, that it just didn't seem to quite fit the mission properly. But I haven't had any negative experience with, we're going to hold this event, and some board member or even staff members pushing to hold it at their spouse's restaurant or whatever. Luckily, I haven't had to deal with that. So.
No, I haven't as much either. I mean, not every organization is fortunate to have a professional fundraiser on staff. We do have our own code of ethics that we're required to follow. But I think, just making sure that everybody's on the same page, and that it's about the structure, of organizations having the opportunity to have executive session where those things can be discussed, and making sure there's transparency on the board, and that there's enough individuals involved. I know boards that, of course, to establish a 501c3, you just have to have a board. And sometimes Yeah, I've seen boards where I'm like, how did they get that passed? But I think making sure that there's diversity of board members, and by diversity I mean in a myriad of ways, you know, diversity of profession, diversity of age, diversity of gender, diversity of ethnicity, and so that kind of helps mitigate some of that.
And I will just add to Chris's response that there probably are smaller nonprofits that might not have a conflict of interest policy but should, and so they would be welcome to contact us at the Community Foundation. We have all sorts of templates that we would be happy to share with organizations that might not have those policies on the books or might need a revision of those policies. Any other questions for our panelists?
Thank you so much for coming and taking time out of your day. This is really important, and having individuals who are invested in our community organizations is what makes this place so special. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to make one other announcement. This was sort of a part one of a part two that we're planning in early fall. We are going to be holding what we're calling a board match expo. So in the same space, we'll be inviting nonprofits that have both open board positions as well as volunteer positions that they're looking to fill in sort of a fair style expo. And so you'd be welcome. Go ahead right now if you're interested and find a board to join, but if you want to meet in a collective environment to talk with different organizations in this space, we'll be doing that on Tuesday, September the 19th from 4 to 6 p.m., a come and go. And if you want to make sure your organization is represented there, just speak with me. Let's just appreciate our panelists for being here tonight and all of you for being here. Thank you so much. We also have a Center for Nonprofit Excellence Facebook group. Join that if you'd like to keep posted on announcements and trainings. Thanks for being here. Have a great evening, and I'll be sticking around here should you have any questions. Thanks.